Well, hello and welcome to the next video in our garden series. This one is on weeding made easy. So first you have to know your enemy. Weeds want to set seed and they need light and water to grow. So if we can prevent those things from happening, your garden bed will be more weed free in the future and each year will get better and better. So one of the first rules then is you don't want any bare soil in your garden. So around all your plants, anytime the light is hitting the soil, that's a chance for all the weed seeds that are already in the ground to sprout. So if you can cover the soil with mulch, that'll help you out quite a bit. It'll also retain water in your garden bed and do other good things. So there's a number of mulches you can use. Fresh grass clippings is a good one. Maybe no more than a ½ inch deep or so it doesn't get all mucky and start to rot on you. Chipped up leaves are good, except if they come from home or those bags that people put out by the street, because there could be jumping worm in them. So if you can find some leaves on campus, that would be great. Cranberry mulch works. Compost would work. Other mulches that'll biodegrade would be good. A chemical-free straw is another option. So there's a number of things like that to keep the light from getting to the soil around your plants. Another key is to not walk where you're going to plant. You want the soil to be nice and loose, so it's easier for your plants to grow and easier to pull weeds out of the ground. So to keep from walking all over the place, it would be nice to set up walking paths within your garden. So I'd like to put down something kind of durable in the paths. Old boards are great, slab wood from a sawmill, old bricks and pavers, stepping stones, things like that would work. You could also use more straw or mulch material and just know where you're walking, so you only compact the soil in between or in the walking paths. We can't have wood chips in your paths in the garden, because if you don't have your garden bed next year, somebody else has to pick out all the wood chips if they don't like where you put your path. Okay, so it's best to weed when the weeds are small. It's a lot easier to get the whole weed out of the ground and not leave the root behind. It's also great to weed the day after it rains. So the nice wet soil, the roots come out a lot easier. So after it rains, go out the next day and do your weeding. So there are a lot of weed seeds in the ground already. It's called the soil seed bank. So there's millions of weed seeds hiding underground. We kind of discourage tilling in the garden. I know a lot of people are used to tilling their garden every year, but every time you till, brings up all those weed seeds, gives them a good shot of sunlight for a split second, and then plants them right back in the ground in the nice loose soil to sprout. So anytime you're tilling, you're planting weeds in my mind. So we discourage weeding or tilling a little bit for that reason. You might not know how to garden without tilling. Well, one way is you just dig a little hole and put your transplant in and cover it back up. If you're planting seeds, just take a hoe or loosen up a spot where you're going to plant your seeds, dribble them in, cover them back up again. You don't have to till the whole garden or work up the whole garden in order to plant a plant in each particular spot that you want to put one. Okay, now there's a number of weeding tools you can use, from hose and other things like that. My favorite one is these guys right here. Some people prefer this one. You can use whichever one, or if you're really good, use both. But pulling weeds is really an easy way to go, especially in a 10 by 20 foot garden plot like these. So you don't have to buy fancy tools, and the more you dig up the soil with tools to weed, the more weeds you might be planting behind yourself. So is that. Now when you pull a weed, if you don't get the whole root, that's okay. You're weakening it significantly, and the next time you'll probably kill it. When you pull them out, there's a few things you can do. I like to use them as mulch. Just take the weed, flip it upside down, and just set it down again. As long as the roots are up in the air where the sun will bake them, it'll die, and you got free mulch. Another option is to just dig a little hole somewhere in your garden and bury all your weeds each time, so they'll rot there and fertilize your garden. We also should have a compost bin out in the garden, so you can just chuck your weeds in there as long as they haven't set seed. We don't want any seed-filled weeds to go into the compost bin, because then the compost will have a whole bunch of weed seeds in it too. Okay, another trick to keeping the weeds down in your garden is to plant in blocks or wide beds and not narrow rows. So maybe your grandma used to plant a row of carrots, and then had a path, and then a row of beets, and then a path, and then a row of something else. Well, most of the garden is path then, and all the paths are a place for weeds to grow. So instead, I like the square foot gardening method, which I've mentioned before, so you might want to check that out on the YouTubes. Basically, you're planting a bed, so a 2 foot wide or however big you want area, completely with the plants you want on a certain spacing, so that they don't compete with one another, but they form a canopy and keep the sun from hitting the soil. So I like using that kind of a technique and growing in beds, having large areas of plants and small areas of paths, so that keeps the soil from getting the sunlight on it and spreading those weeds. So weeds also like water. So when you're watering your garden, if you can concentrate the water you're adding to just where your veggies are, that'll also help keep the weeds from getting a head start. So try to water just where your plants are. You also, especially if you're a new gardener, you won't necessarily know if it's a weed or a plant that you planted, so when you're growing stuff from seed. So it helps to mark where all your seeds were planted, so that later when a whole bunch of little weeds pop up in a straight line, odds are they're your lettuce, so you don't weed those out. So mark your rows or mark your spots in your beds so that you know where your seedlings will come up. People often wonder how much time it's going to take to weed their garden plot, and it will get better year after year. The first year will be the worst, so congratulations. Welcome to this journey. You'll probably have to weed once when you're planting or once in May, and then in June probably you'll want to weed about once a week. July maybe twice during the month. August maybe once only during the month, and then probably again when you're harvesting. So the weeds will grow more in June, and then after a while they'll get easier, and then next year it'll be twice as easy. So it'll get better. In summary then, keep the soil covered, don't walk where you're going to plant, and keep on top of those weeds when they're little. And we'll see you out in the garden.